I sold your car. 4 words delivered with such casual cruelty that for a moment I thought I had misheard. Andrew, what did you just say? My voice sounded unfamiliar in the empty kitchen, thin and strained against the soft hum of the refrigerator Richard had repaired just 3 weeks before his heart gave out. The Toyota, Mom. I sold it yesterday. Got $8,000 for it. Pretty good for a 10-year-old car. The satisfaction in his voice made my stomach twist. I've already put the money into an account I set up to manage your finances. You need to start being practical now that Dad's gone. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. My eyes drifted to the faded wallpaper Richard and I had hung together 26 years ago, back when this house was new and so were our dreams. That car wasn't just transportation, it was Richard's pride. A reliable sedan he had maintained meticulously, the same car he used to teach me how to check oil, change a tire, and never let myself be taken advantage of. But I need that car for work, I said, struggling to keep the panic out of my voice. The hospital is across town. There's no direct bus route. Andrew sighed, impatient, dismissive. Mom, be realistic. You're 58. Should you even be working at your age? And honestly, the insurance and maintenance would have been too much for you alone. Alone. The word echoed in my mind. Richard had been gone for 17 days. 17! And already my son was speaking to me like I was incapable, like I was a burden instead of the woman who had worked nearly 40 years and helped build everything we had. I looked up bus routes, he continued briskly, like he was closing a business deal. It'll take about an hour and 20 minutes each way, one transfer. Good exercise, too. I'll text you the details. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I stood there, still in my hospital scrubs after a 12-hour shift, surrounded by sympathy cards and half-eaten casseroles. And slowly, the truth settled in. My son had sold my car, without asking, without warning, and expected me to thank him. My legs gave out beneath me, and I sank into a chair. Richard would have known what to do. He always did. He had a way of handling Andrew, firm but calm, never letting things explode into something worse. But Richard wasn't here anymore, and the grief hit me again like a wave. When I could finally breathe, I reached for my phone, hovering over Margaret's name, our family attorney, and Richard's oldest friend. But I hesitated. What would I even say? That my own son had stolen from me, and I didn't know how to stand up to him? The shame burned too hot. I lowered the phone and walked to the window. The empty driveway stared back at me. That space, where the Toyota had always been, felt like a wound. That's when the practical reality hit. My shift started at 7 a.m. To make it by bus, I'd have to leave by 5:30, return after 8 p.m., in winter, both trips in darkness. Then something else struck me. The title. For our 30th anniversary, Richard had transferred the Toyota fully into my name. One less thing for you to worry about, he'd said. My heart started pounding. Did Andrew even check that? I rushed to the filing cabinet. The automotive folder was gone. My hands trembled as I searched. Insurance, medical, house deed, everything else was there. But the car documents, completely missing. Andrew had taken them last week when he said he was helping organize. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at Richard's untouched side, his glasses still resting on the nightstand. This wasn't impulsive. This was planned, calculated. My phone buzzed. A text from Andrew. A complicated bus route, nearly 2 hours each way. And at the bottom, the exercise will be good for you. Also, we should go through Dad's tools soon. I can probably sell those too. His tools. 40 years of work, of skill, of identity. Something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. The grief hardened into something else. clarity, cold, steady anger. Richard wouldn't have wanted me silent. He would have expected me to stand up. This time, I didn't hesitate. I called Margaret. She arrived within 40 minutes, sharp as ever, silver hair pulled tight, eyes already burning with outrage. "He did what?" she demanded after I explained. "This isn't just wrong, Evelyn, it's illegal. The title is in your name. He had no right." I swallowed hard. "He took the documents." Margaret nodded slowly. "Then we take it back." She paused, then reached into her portfolio. "There's something else." She handed me an envelope, my name written in Richard's careful handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside, a letter and a small key. "Dearest Evelyn, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and Andrew has begun making decisions he has no right to make. I've known for some time he's changed, so I prepared. The key opens a safe deposit box. Inside, you'll find everything I've built for us for 30 years. But more importantly, there's something in the Toyota's glove compartment, something Andrew must never find." I looked up, tears blurring everything. What did he mean? What was he building? Margaret's voice was firm. "We're going to find out." She picked up her phone. "First, we report the car stolen, and then we get it back." The next morning, we drove toward Boulder, toward answers, toward the truth Richard had hidden, and for the first time since his death, I didn't feel powerless. I felt ready. But today had already given me something just as valuable. The first real step toward reclaiming not just my car, but my voice. Reliable Properties occupied the entire top floor of a brick building in downtown Denver. As I rode the elevator up, dressed in my simple navy dress, the same one I had worn to Richard's funeral, I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't quite belong here. Margaret had offered to come with me, but this was something I needed to face alone. My first step into the life Richard had quietly prepared for me. Susan Chen was waiting at the elevator doors. She was younger than I had expected, perhaps in her mid-40s, with an efficient presence softened by a genuine warmth in her eyes. "Mrs. Winters," she said, extending her hand, "it's a pleasure to finally meet you in person. Richard spoke of you often, and always with great admiration." I followed her through a modern office where employees worked quietly at sleek desks. No one paid me any special attention. To them, I was just another client. If only they knew. Susan's corner office offered sweeping views of downtown Denver and the mountains beyond. She gestured for me to sit at a small conference table where several neatly arranged folders were waiting. "Richard prepared extensively for this transition," she explained as she took her seat across from me. "He updated these materials every quarter to ensure everything would be current whenever the time came." My throat tightened. Even now, Richard was taking care of me, thinking ahead, anticipating needs I hadn't even realized I would have. "Where would you like to begin?" she asked, gently. "With an overview," I managed. "I'm still trying to understand the scope of all this." She opened the first folder, revealing a detailed map of Denver, dotted with highlighted properties. The Winter Mechanics portfolio includes 17 residential properties and 4 commercial buildings across the metropolitan area. For the next 2 hours, Susan walked me through everything: purchase histories, renovations, occupancy rates, rental income, projections. The residential properties ranged from modest 4-unit buildings purchased early on to the crown jewel, Aspen Heights. The complex has 32 units, premium pricing, consistently at 98% occupancy. It generates the highest revenue in the portfolio. She paused briefly before adding, "Your son's unit, 14B, is one of the largest 2-bedroom apartments." I hesitated. "Does Andrew know who owns the building?" No, she said. All tenant interactions go through reliable properties. Ownership details are not disclosed. She added carefully, Richard was very specific about maintaining that separation, especially regarding your son. I nodded slowly. Richard understood something I was only now beginning to fully see. Andrew's respect had become tied to wealth and status. If he knew his mother owned his luxury apartment, it would have changed everything. Perhaps not for the better. And the commercial properties? I asked. Susan turned to another section. 4 in total, including this building's top 3 floors. The most significant is Riverside Plaza, a mixed-use development with retail and office space. The sheer scale of it all made my head spin. While I had been working long hospital shifts, living a modest life, Richard had quietly built an empire, one that now generated more monthly income than I had earned in my best years. Everything is designed to run smoothly without requiring your daily involvement, Susan continued. Our management fee is 8%, below market. And my role? As owner, you have final authority on major decisions, she said with a small smile. But, as Richard often said, the beauty of this system is that it works whether you're involved or not. By the time we finished, the afternoon sun had shifted across the windows. It's overwhelming, I admitted. Of course it is, Susan replied. Richard built this over decades. She paused, then added softly, he was excited to finally share it with you. He had planned a trip to Italy next year. That's when he was going to tell you. Italy, a dream I had carried quietly for years. There's one more thing, Susan said, reaching into her desk. She handed me a small box wrapped in blue paper, my favorite color. Inside was a delicate gold pendant shaped like a key, studded with tiny diamonds. A note rested beneath it. You've always held the key to my heart. Now you hold the keys to our future. Use them wisely, my love. Tears blurred my vision as I fastened it around my neck. It felt like more than a gift. It felt like responsibility. What would you like to do next? Susan asked gently. The possibilities stretched out before me. Travel, luxury, philanthropy. But beneath all of that, one thought rose above the rest. Richard hadn't just built wealth, he had created freedom. I need time to process everything, I said, but there is one immediate matter. My son, Andrew. Susan's expression remained neutral. Yes? I understand his lease is month to month. She nodded. I'd like to review it, and I want to know if there have been any issues. She hesitated slightly. He's been consistent with rent. However, there have been complaints, noise, parking violations, and an entitled attitude toward staff. I wasn't surprised. I see. The decision settled quietly into place. Don't make any changes yet, but I want to visit Aspen Heights tomorrow. I should start by understanding the most significant property. Susan smiled faintly. Of course. The next morning, Aspen Heights stood gleaming in one of Denver's trendiest neighborhoods, glass and steel reflecting the sunlight. I parked the Toyota in the visitor section, deliberately. I could have arrived in the company car Susan offered, but this mattered. This was still me. The lobby was immaculate. Marble floors, a cascading water feature, staff in crisp uniforms. Raj Patel, the building manager, greeted me professionally, unaware of who I really was. To him, I was just another representative from the company. Aspen Heights maintains a 98% occupancy rate, he explained as we entered the elevator. Amenities include a rooftop pool, fitness center, yoga studio, business center, and 24-hour concierge service. I nodded, absorbing it all. My property, my responsibility. And the tenants? I asked.
primarily young professionals and executives, average age between 35 and 45.
Andrew poured wine into crystal glasses, handing one to me before gesturing toward the living room. "Sit," he said, settling into the corner of the sofa like he owned not just the apartment but the entire building, and perhaps, in his mind, the narrative of my life as well. "We need to have a serious conversation about your finances." I took a slow sip of the wine before responding, allowing the silence to stretch just long enough to shift the balance of control. "Do we?" He frowned slightly, thrown off by my calm tone. "Mom, I'm not trying to criticize you, I'm trying to help. Selling the car, honestly, it was necessary. You can't keep holding on to things that are draining you financially." There it was again, that certainty, that assumption of authority. I set the glass down carefully on the table. "Andrew, before we discuss my finances, I think we need to address something more immediate." He leaned back, crossing one leg over the other. "Okay, what?" "I sold my car," I said, my voice steady, "without my permission." A flicker of impatience crossed his face. "I explained that already. It was the practical decision. You weren't using it efficiently and—" "That's not the point." My interruption stopped him mid-sentence. For a moment, he just stared at me, clearly unaccustomed to being cut off, especially by me. "The point," I continued, "is that you made a decision about my property without consulting me. You didn't ask, you didn't suggest, you acted." He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Mom, you're taking this too personally. I was looking out for you. You've been struggling, and someone has to step in." "Step in," I repeated softly. "Yes," he said, leaning forward now, his tone firm. "Because, frankly, you haven't been making the best decisions lately. DoorDash deliveries at your age? Taking the bus? It's not sustainable. I'm trying to help you get back on track." I studied him quietly. The confidence, the conviction, the complete blindness to what he was actually saying. "Back on track," I echoed. "And where exactly is that track, Andrew?" He blinked, caught off guard again. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said, folding my hands in my lap, "what defines being on track to you? Is it this?" I gestured subtly around the apartment, the glass, the steel, the carefully curated illusion of success, income brackets, appearances, other people's approval. "That's not fair," he snapped. "It's about stability, security, success." "And respect?" I asked quietly. He hesitated. "Does that factor in anywhere?" I continued. "Of course it does," he said defensively. "Then why?" I asked, holding his gaze. "Did you think it was acceptable to treat me without it?" The words landed harder than I raised my voice ever could. Andrew looked away first. "That's not what I did," he muttered. "It is," I said gently, not accusing, just stating a truth he couldn't sidestep. "You didn't see me as someone to respect. You saw me as a problem to manage." Silence settled between us, heavier now. From the kitchen, the faint hum of the refrigerator filled the space Richard once would have softened with conversation, with warmth, with presence. "I was trying to help," Andrew said again, but this time the certainty was gone. There was something else underneath it, uncertainty, maybe, even doubt. "I believe you," I replied, "but intent doesn't erase impact." He ran his hair through his hair, pacing now. "So what, you want me to apologize? Fine, I'm sorry, but that doesn't change the fact that you're struggling." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I let him sit with that assumption, let it exist in the space between us, unchallenged for just a moment longer. Then I said, "Andrew, do you know what your father valued most?" He stopped pacing. "What?" he asked, quieter now. "Integrity," I said. "Not success, not appearances. Integrity. Doing the right thing even when no one is watching. Especially then." Andrew looked down at the floor. And respect, I added, not something you give based on status, but something you extend because of who a person is, because of what they've lived, what they've built, what they've given you. His jaw tightened. I didn't raise you to measure people by what they earn, I continued, and your father certainly didn't. That's not what I'm doing, he said, but the defense sounded weaker now. Isn't it? I asked softly. Another silence. This one longer, more uncomfortable, more honest. There was a knock at the door, dinner arriving, but neither of us moved to answer it right away. For the first time since I'd walked in, Andrew didn't look like the confident man in control of everything. He looked like someone being forced to confront something he'd been avoiding for a long time, and I realized, as I sat there watching my son wrestle with that truth, that this moment mattered far more than any revelation about property or money, because if he couldn't understand this, then none of the rest would ever mean anything.
Let's sit. We have important things to discuss. I lowered myself onto the sofa, uncomfortable though undeniably elegant. From this new vantage point, I saw everything differently. My son was living in a property I owned, surrounded by luxury he hadn't truly paid for, financed through credit, while believing his widowed mother couldn't even afford car insurance. "I see you got the car back somehow," Andrew began, his tone light, almost amused. "Care to explain how that happened?" "The buyer returned it," I replied calmly, meeting his gaze, once he realized it had been sold illegally, without my permission. Andrew waved a dismissive hand. "A technicality. I was handling it for you, saving you the trouble." "By sending me on a 2-hour bus commute to work?" I asked, keeping my voice even, factual, not accusatory. "Mom, be realistic," he sighed. "You can't afford to maintain that car on a nurse aid's salary. Dad handled everything, finances, maintenance. I'm just stepping up now that he's gone." There it was, the assumption beneath it all, that without Richard, I was incapable, that his judgment outweighed mine simply because he earned more. "I appreciate your concern," I said carefully, "but I didn't ask for that kind of help. What I need from you is respect for my autonomy and my property." He leaned forward, adopting a tone I imagined he used with difficult clients. "That's exactly why we need to talk. You're not thinking practically. Grief is affecting your judgment." A pause. "I've created a financial plan for you," he continued. "It involves selling the house, it's too big, and moving into a senior living community." I blinked, genuinely stunned. "Senior living? Andrew, I'm 58. I'm not ready for that." "It's not just for elderly people," he said, condescending. "It's for people who need support, no maintenance, built-in activities, transportation." The doorbell cut him off. He returned moments later with neatly packaged Italian takeout, plating pasta and salad with practiced ease. I watched him, considering my next move. "I've already found a place," he went on. "Morningside Gardens, modest but suitable. Selling the house covers the entry fee, and your pension can handle the rest." I set down my fork. "And what about what I want, Andrew?" I asked quietly. He looked confused. "I'm doing this for you." "By selling my home without asking? By getting rid of my car? By planning to sell your father's tools?" My voice stayed calm but firm. "That's not help, that's control." His expression hardened. "Someone needs to take control. You're not equipped to handle this." "Based on what?" I challenged. "My 35-year career? A mortgage paid on time for 26 years? The fact that your father and I raised you, put you through college, and never relied on credit?" He flushed. "That was different. Dad handled things."
We were partners, I corrected. We made decisions together. His phone chimed. He frowned. Building inspection tomorrow. That's inconvenient. I almost smiled at the irony. About the tools, I said. I removed your listings. They're not for sale. His eyes widened. How did you even... Why? They're just collecting dust. They were your father's livelihood for 40 years, I said steadily. They paid for your education, your first car, your first home. Sentimental value doesn't pay bills. And what bills are we so desperate to pay? I asked. The mortgage is current, utilities are automated, I have health insurance. What crisis are you solving? He hesitated. It's about planning ahead, he said finally, being practical. Or about control, I suggested gently, making decisions for me because you've decided I can't make them myself. Silence stretched between us. I'm trying to help you, he said at last. Did your father actually ask you to do this? I asked. Well, not exactly, but he knew you'd need guidance. I think I knew your father better than that. His jaw tightened. You're being emotional. That initiative with the car was illegal, I reminded him. A technicality, he repeated. No, I said quietly. A boundary. I stood. I appreciate dinner, Andrew, but we'll continue this conversation another time, when you're ready to listen. You're leaving? He asked, startled. There's nothing to discuss. I'm not selling my home. I'm not moving. Those decisions are mine. At the door, I turned back one last time. I've been managing just fine, I said. The real question is, can you handle the fact that I don't need your control disguised as help? His face flushed with anger, but I didn't wait for a response. Driving home in the Toyota Richard had cared for so meticulously, I felt something unexpected. Lightness. For the first time since his death, I hadn't just defended a decision, I had defended myself. Tomorrow would bring the inspection of Unit 14B. A small shift on the surface, a significant one underneath. The game had changed. Only I knew the rules. The next morning, Andrew called 3 times, each message sharper than the last. Mom, this inspection is ridiculous, invasive. They're threatening lease violations. I let them go to voicemail. Instead, I sat across from Susan Chen, reviewing the Aspen Heights portfolio. This is standard procedure after ownership change, she explained. All units are being inspected. And my son? I asked. He hasn't been told? No, tenants were only notified of a routine assessment. Good, I said. And Raj understands no special treatment? Absolutely. By afternoon, I was back at home, tending Richard's garden, listening to Andrew's frustration escalate. The final message came at 3:17 p.m. They cited me for violations, thermostat modifications, noise complaints, storage issues. They're threatening eviction. This is insane. I set down my gloves. Not surprising. Rules had always been flexible to Andrew. My phone rang again. Margaret, your son just called my office, she said dryly. He wants to file a complaint. I smiled faintly. Did you mention you represent me? I told him I'd check for conflicts. A pause. How long are you keeping this secret? She asked. She wasn't wrong. The longer I waited, the more complicated it became. I'll tell him soon, I said, but first he needs to understand something. That his behavior isn't acceptable, regardless of money? Exactly. That evening, I arrived at Aspen Heights just as Raj finished for the day. He greeted me professionally, handing over a leather portfolio. The full inspection report for Unit 14B, he said.
I've marked actual violations versus minor issues. Thank you, Raj. I took it, feeling the quiet shift of power settle into place. The next phase had begun.
Andrew had completely lost sight of what truly defined success and value. Your father, I said carefully, steadying my voice, was exactly where he wanted to be, doing work he found meaningful and honorable. Andrew let out a short, dismissive laugh. Fixing other people's cars in a small garage? That's not exactly what I'd call ambition. I held his gaze, refusing to let the comment pass unchallenged. He built a reputation based on trust. People came to him not because he marketed himself well or had the right connections, but because he did his work with integrity. He treated every customer the same, whether they drove a luxury car or something barely holding together. Andrew crossed his arms, clearly unconvinced. That kind of thinking doesn't get you ahead anymore. No, I replied quietly, it gets you respect, the kind that lasts longer than status. For a moment, the room fell silent. Andrew shifted his weight, his earlier confidence faltering just slightly. It was subtle, but it was there. You're avoiding the point, Andrew said, finally, though with less certainty. This rent increase, it's unreasonable. Someone is making a deliberate decision to push me out. Or, I said, keeping my tone measured, someone is correcting an imbalance that should have been addressed long ago. His eyes narrowed. You keep saying things like that, like you know more than you're telling me. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I watched him, really watched him, the restless pacing, the frustration, the disbelief that the world wasn't bending in his favor this time. This isn't about punishment, Andrew, I said at last. It's about accountability. You're being asked to live by the same standards as everyone else, nothing more. That's not how things work, he insisted, though now it sounded more like something he was trying to convince himself of. People use their advantages. That's normal. Using advantages is one thing. Expecting exceptions at the expense of fairness is another. He ran a hand through his hair again, the gesture softer this time, less controlled. So what am I supposed to do? Just accept it? Yes, I said simply, or make a different choice. But either way, the decision and the consequences are yours. Andrew exhaled sharply, turning away from me. For the first time since he'd arrived, he looked uncertain, not angry, not defensive, just unsettled. I thought you'd be on my side, he muttered. I am, I said gently, just not in the way you expected. He didn't respond. And in that quiet, I realized something had shifted, not dramatically, not completely, but enough. The certainty he'd carried into this room wasn't as solid as it had been before. It wasn't a victory, it wasn't even resolution, but it was a beginning. That you measure his life by his title or income says more about your values than his achievements. Something in my tone finally reached him. Andrew's expression shifted, just slightly from dismissive confidence to uncertainty. His eyes drifted around the modest living room, the worn but comfortable furniture, the walls filled with family photos, the shelves lined with books softened by years of use. I just want what's best for both of us, he said at last, though his voice had lost its certainty. A better life than this, financial security, status that opens doors. And you assume I don't have those things, I replied calmly, simply because they don't look the way you expect them to? He didn't answer. That says more about how you measure worth than anything else, Andrew. He sank into the sofa, suddenly looking tired, older even. I don't understand what's happening lately, he admitted. First the car, then the inspection, now the rent increase. It's like everything is turning against me. Or, I said gently, it's simply removing the special treatment you've come to expect. His head snapped up. Showing you what life looks like when no exceptions are made. "You've changed, Mom," he said, studying me. "Since Dad died, you're different. Harder." "Not harder," I corrected, "clearer about my boundaries, my values, and what I'm willing to accept from anyone, including you." Silence settled between us. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, Andrew was being forced to confront a possibility he had never considered, that the world didn't operate on status, connections, or entitlement. "So what am I supposed to do about the rent?" he asked finally. "I can afford it, that's not the issue. It's the principle." "Except for the lease violations," I reminded him. "Minor technicalities. Technicalities that matter to the people responsible for safety and management." I held his gaze. "You have choices. Pay the market rate, find a less expensive place, or make a genuine case based on your actual record, not who you know." He considered it briefly. Then his expression hardened again. "This feels like I'm being taught some kind of lesson, and I don't appreciate it." "Sometimes life does that, teaches lessons we didn't ask for, but need." He stood abruptly. "I should go." At the door, he paused. His eyes fell on the framed photo beside the table, Richard in his workshop, surrounded by tools, his face lit with quiet joy. "Dad would have helped me," he said softly. "He would have made some calls, fixed this." "Your father," I said gently, "would have expected you to face the consequences of your choices with integrity." He didn't respond. "And he would have believed that paying the same rent as everyone else is simply the right thing to do." Andrew left without another word. After the door closed, I sat in Richard's chair, my fingers tracing the worn armrests shaped by decades of his presence. The conversation had been difficult, but necessary. For the first time, I hadn't softened the truth. I hadn't hidden behind politeness or maternal instinct. I had met my son as an adult and held my ground. My phone buzzed. A message from Susan. "Tenant of 14B has requested a follow-up meeting regarding the rent adjustment. How would you like us to proceed?" I stared at the screen. The easy path would be to reveal everything now, to use power to demand respect. But that would teach the wrong lesson, that money mattered more than character. "Proceed with standard protocols," I typed. "No exceptions. Document everything." The harder path would take time, it would bring discomfort, but it was the only one that offered any hope of real change. That evening, I opened Richard's journal. Each entry felt like a conversation across time, his voice steady, thoughtful, unwavering. He hadn't built wealth for status, he had built it for freedom, freedom to live according to values, not expectations. And in his final entry, written just weeks before his death, his greatest concern was clear. Not money, not legacy, but Andrew. The next day, everything became clear. The tools, the workshop, that was how Andrew would understand. Not through lectures, through truth. When Andrew arrived that evening, I led him silently to the garage. The moment he stepped inside, he stopped. "Dad's shop," he murmured, "exactly as he left it, because it matters exactly as it is." I picked up Richard's wrench, worn smooth from years of use. "This tool alone has generated more value than most people realize, not in resale, but in purpose." I handed him the journal. "Before you read this, there's something you need to know." He looked at me confused. "Your father wasn't just a mechanic." I took a breath. "He was building something else, quietly, for decades." Andrew frowned. "Building what?" "A real estate portfolio, currently worth around $4.7 million. Silence. "Including," I added, "the apartment building you live in." The journal slipped from his hands. "That's not possible," he whispered. "We lived like this." "We lived according to our values," I said, "not our limitations." His voice dropped. "You're saying you own my building?" "Yes." "The inspection, the rent?" Not a coincidence. The weight of it hit him all at once. "You sold my car," I continued softly, "while living below market rent in a property I own, believing I couldn't afford insurance." He said nothing. He couldn't. I placed the journal beside him. This explains everything, what your father built and why. I rested a hand briefly on his shoulder. I'll give you time. As I turned to leave, his voice stopped me. Mom, we'll talk after you read it. Some truths couldn't be explained, they had to be understood. I left him there alone, in the workshop, surrounded by the tools he once dismissed, tools that represented everything his father believed in, everything Andrew had forgotten. The revelation was complete. Now came the harder part, finding his way back.